You either have to be a
The eater.
consolidator or the consolidatee.
Yes, sir.
And timing is often everything, and you can't always determine your own future. You have to move with the market. It's also a really good message. I'm a big believer that if you're going to be a risk taker and you're going to really try to do something different, you have to be prepared to fail. And you will fail. And there will be mini failures and there'll be big failures, right? I am an avowed kind of tech addict and heard about through a friend, a colleague from Silicon Valley phoned about a new company he was with, and they were doing a brand new technology, and they were called pen computers. After 3 years and hundreds of millions of dollars going to it, the technology just couldn't come together to be feasible and usable. And so basically we were facing an industry going out of business and had to decide, are we going to wrap it up?
This is Giants. On this show, we sit down with the founders, builders, and visionaries who help shape Vancouver and are building what it will become. The decisions, the disasters, the defining moments. I'm Nejeed Kassam. Let's dig in. Before Salesforce or Oracle, a Vancouver-based entrepreneur from Oliver, BC, was an early pioneer of the very concept of the CRM as we know it. I looked it up. While technically he isn't the founder of the category we now call the CRM, it feels pretty darn close. Our guest today, the legendary Norm Francis, co-founded the Basic Software Group in 1970, building Simply Accounting amongst many other tools. He then co-founded what became the Pivotal Corporation, where he basically invented the CRM and took it public on the NASDAQ. An entrepreneur, an investor, a philanthropist, in his words, just a kid from Oliver. Norm Francis, welcome to Giants. It's an honor and a pleasure having you here today.
Nice to talk to you.
Now, I would be remiss to say that Norm has also been a friend and a mentor of mine for so many years. He was an investor in my last company and got a return, not as big as he wanted, I'm sure, but a return, and really grateful to have you here. Let's dig in, shall we? You've mentioned to me before how you're just a small town kid in some ways who came to the big city and searching for adventure. Tell me about that upbringing and how it influenced who you've become.
Yeah, Oliver was and still is a smallish farming community. I was born there and raised there until I came to the big city when I was 18. And I think my parents had a small farm, a fruit farm. In those days, it was all fruit farming, now more grapes. And so we had a small farm. My dad worked at the local hardware store. My mom was a librarian at the elementary school. And I think that small town farming growing up really, when I reflect back on it, really influenced me.
And tell me more about that. You know, we sometimes see some of the entrepreneurs today, they feel a little bit like they have an entitlement to do something. And, you know, you and I have spoken a lot in the past about this small town grit that you had. And can you give us some examples or share some stories about that? Tell us, you know, how that was reflected in the future and some of those lessons, how you pulled them through into you know, the decades of work you did working in tech of all things.
Well, farming is in a way very entrepreneurial. Farmers are very independent. They have to rely upon themselves. And I think it's very hard work. Farming is hard work. There's lots of uncertainty, weather, bugs, picking fruit, bad seasons. And so farmers work really hard and they have to really be adaptable and they have to take care of themselves. In those days, at least, there was no safety net that kind of helped you. And I think finally, really important, which has influenced my life, is farmers are a community and they help one another. And that has influenced both the way I've done business through my career and my belief in kind of helping kind of people in your community.
Sometimes people from small towns have a bit of a chip on their shoulder. You see that in sports and in, you know, other areas where people have become elite, but they keep those small town roots. But it does have a little bit of a big city, small city thing. I don't know if I believe that, but do you think that exists? And do you think it's helped you over the decades?
I think rural communities, you see it in modern day politics. Rural communities do have different attitudes about things than the big city elite, if I can put it that way.
Sure. Which I think now you are one of, by the way. So there's a funny dichotomy in there.
But I still think part of Oliver's is in
Absolutely.
me. And in fact, I can often I have a sense when I meet people. I've met many people who I've tended to like or align myself with, and I can sense they're from a smaller community.
That's awesome. Do you think that's an advantage?
I do think the independence. I was given a lot of independence at a very young age.
Kid.
As a kid, I had a lot of independence. I was expected to work hard. Work was always at a very young age. We basically grew everything we ate through the winter. We went fishing, we went hunting, and it was that self-reliance. I think that's one of the most critical things that it kind of instilled in me is having confidence to rely on yourself, take care of yourself, and not expect anybody else to do it.
Which I think parlays really well into entrepreneurship, which is what we're going to talk about. So, people, I'm sure, will Google you. They'll, you went to UBC and you studied, but I think what a lot of people don't realize is just, and I'm not blowing smoke, I promise, Norm. Yeah. You didn't just build amazing companies in Vancouver. You were a stalwart in building what our tech scene is today. In those early days, all those years ago, did you know building stuff would be a big part of your life? Did you know that growing things and, that idea of like being foundational in your own businesses, and obviously maybe not in the city of Vancouver, but was building kind of a part of your soul and did you set out to do that, or was it something that just sort of happened?
I think some of that happened through, I'm a curious person. In my upbringing, and I built things. I take apart motors. I built go-karts. I was very curious, and my parents, when I think back on it, they fostered that curiosity. They didn't force me any. They just exposed me to a lot of different things. And I think curiosity is a great quality, and I encourage people. I'm still a very curious person, even at my age, to learn new things.
You're still a young man, Norm. Don't worry about it.
And so, I think curiosity is what led me to try to help out the local community, which was very small the tech community, when I got involved in it, and to meet new people, to be curious about what they were doing, that kind of thing.
And I know you're a voracious reader, and you do on the occasion listen to podcasts that are not this one, but that's okay.
Yeah.
So it's clear to me that those values of curiosity really have run through all these years. But you've brought it up. I think there are many of us listening today who are parents or grandparents. And, in a world that's changing, it's uncertain, what are the values, the things we can pull through to this next generations? In our family, intellectual curiosity is a big one. Do you think that value is something, that is fundamental for us to be teaching our children? And if so, how do we do it?
I think it actually might be one of the most important qualities, because I've become more focused on it even after becoming a grandparent.
Exactly.
Becoming a grandparent 8 years ago, I have two grandkids, and watching kind of took me back to first principles about curiosity, and watching how a new baby, a young child, how curious they are, and actually enforcing the idea that we need to be curious to learn and I think it's even more important in today's world, whether it's a world of technology, what's going on politically around the world. Young people need to be adaptable, and being curious and accepting the future, not knowing what it'll be, and being adaptable. Curiosity is a really important part of that.
You talk about when you meet people, you see certain things, and you got that sort of small town feel. When I meet people, the people I find myself the most drawn to are those who are curious, who ask really good questions, who listen to responses, not to reflect back something, but to really challenge their mind and their perspectives. And I think it's one of the beauties of having a relationship with you, but also just going out there and having the opportunity to meet wonderful people and really push myself in that. And I think I really agree.
I also believe that curiosity and learning, discussion and debate is part of that.
Yes, sir.
And I must confess, I do love to debate, or argue might be the other term for it. And I think that's a good thing if you can have a respectful discussion.
Absolutely.
You may not agree with the other person, but you walk away respecting the other person's maybe not agreeing with them.
And moving this, and we'll start to transition into some of the work stuff, but I think that is a quality that's been missing in the work cultures a lot. I think when I've been building and the people I'm most grateful to watch build, they tell their teams or their bosses, they have a culture where they can disagree, where they can fervently, passionately believe something, articulate it, and then once a decision made, the whole team gets on board. And to me, that's a quality of magnificent companies, and it seems like you agree.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think I think it's really key because that's how it's the old saying, there are no bad ideas, right?
Just bad execution.
Right. Yeah, I think that good companies try to pull out, and there are techniques to doing this,
Of course.
in a business where, if the boss speaks first, usually the best ideas don't come out. In fact, you want the most junior person to be making their point
Absolutely.
the first.
Absolutely.
Right.
You studied engineering and then started working in accounting when you graduated. And that led in some form or another to co-founding Basic Software Group and then developing Simply Accounting and ACPAC amongst ACPAC, right? Yeah.
Right.
Let's get into this a little bit. When Basic first got started, were you just solving a problem you saw, you felt, you experienced, or was there a big plan, some kind of grandiose, we're going to do this and this and this? So how did it all come about?
Well, the core was that in the middle, this is in the 70s, and in the middle of the 70s, there was the phenomenon of the microchip had become.
Of course.
And there were all of these entrepreneurs, mainly in Silicon Valley, in the Bay Area, actually in the East Bay, and they were creating these little companies and these new little computers. At the time, they were called microcomputers, later to be rebranded as personal computers when the IBM PC came out in 1981. And there were small companies, and one of those small companies actually was Apple at the time.
Those small companies.
So our idea was that, wow, these little computers could do many of the things that there were only large computers, and they were not available to most businesses. There were very few big computers, the big IBM
and they were
computers.
obscenely expensive.
Exactly. And so our ideas was, wow, we can write software to do business functions like accounting, and we can dramatically change the pricing model and really introduce a new category of business tool.
And what got you to that? I appreciate that that's where you got to, but what got you to that? Was it working you worked at one of the firms or something, right? And
right.
You saw the pain. Is that it?
I had a computer science degree, but actually when I got out of university, there weren't many jobs around in computer science. So totally by coincidence, I didn't know a debit from a credit, but I had friends that were going into commerce or were going to become, go an article to be chartered accountants. And I thought, wow, that seemed interesting. And I just kind of it was one of those decisions that I kind of lucked into. And it became a real foundation of my business experience. And it was a combination of, I understood how accounting was still all manual, basically. And then I met these other fellows who were computer science guys. I understood what computers could do. And that was what led to.
So it was sort of happened. It wasn't like you planned it, so to speak.
Well, it did. It was planned once we recognized that the computers could, with the right software and packaged software that didn't require a lot of that you could use out of the box, that could change the industry.
Lack of customization.
Right.
Interesting. Right. I want to talk a little bit about Keith Wales because he was your co-founder a couple of times, right? A lot is spoken about and said about the relationship and the importance of co-founders. Tell me about that relationship, what it meant to you, and let's extract some wisdom from that. And how important are those relationships to the success of businesses?
Yeah, I'm actually a big believer in that partnerships, whether it's two people, three people, especially in founding a new business, is a really good model because you get complementary skills. Keith was a pure computer science guy, brilliant software engineer, could manage other software engineers. I had by that time had the business background and the financial background, and it was a really good combination. And being a sole entrepreneur founder is a really lonely can be
I
a
think
very
being
lonely.
any entrepreneur is lonely. I can't
It
imagine
can be very
solo.
lonely. And I think having one or two partners where you can sit around behind closed doors and try to solve the many problems that always arise in business is really something to look for. More the complementary skills and being able to bounce ideas off one another.
Unfortunately, we don't get to dig into every detail of all these businesses. That would take us a week with your legendary career. Right. I want to talk a little bit about the decision to sell Basic. I once had a friend and a mentor who said to me, once you sell, you're a sellout, and you'll never forget that feeling of leaving that business behind and moving on to the next thing. And I never really understood that till we sold our last business. And, you know, there are founders who regret it and founders that have so much gratitude. Where did you fall on that spectrum? What was the calculation? Was it always the plan? Tell me about that.
Well, it kind of happened. We had a really good business going. Most of our business was in the U.S., but we were we had extremely strong engineering. We had strong financial, background. We were profitable, but we were kind of weak on the sales and marketing. It was where and Vancouver in those days, sales and marketing in the tech industry was almost non-existent. And so it was kind of a situation where, there was a good amount of money offered.
There was an opportunity.
There was an opportunity, and the market was changing. This is by the mid-'80s.
Right?
And the personal computer
And you'd been in for about 10 years.
By that time, about 7-8 years.
Yep.
But the industry was consolidating. It was getting big. I'll put that in quotes. And it was consolidating. Yep. And the bigger software companies were starting to buy small guys. And I'm a big believer in the tech business because it moves very quickly. You either have to be a consolidator or the consolidatee.
Yes, sir.
And timing is often everything. And you can't always determine your own future. You have to move with the market. And we made the decision. For us at the time, we took money off the table. It was the right thing to do.
Any regrets? Would you do anything different all those years ago?
No, I wouldn't change. You can use the past as a lesson, but I don't have any regrets about that decision. I think it was a good decision. And as a result of it, for me personally, we were acquired by a New York-based company named Computer Associates. So it was a fast-growing company. It sounds small in today's terms. There's 150 million revenue already public on the New York Stock Exchange. And it was a hard-driving New York-style business. And I spent 4 years there as a vice president running different things. And I really learned that was worth it. I really grew up seeing that hard-driving New York-style business. So ultimately, I learned a lot from that experience.
Well, and that negotiation must have been fun too. I mean, I don't know, maybe it's the lawyer in me, but you must have learned a ton through the process of selling the business that served you well in the decades to come.
Yeah, mostly in the 4 years subsequent, actually, was the acquisition, because Computer Associates went from around 150 million in revenue at the time to $1.25 billion by the time I left, just 4 years later.
Wow.
A lot of it through acquisition. And I learned a lot about we had both been on the selling side of a business, and then I saw the acquisition side of it, and that helped me a lot in my next kind of few gigs to kind of know that kind of whole side of the business,
which is what we're about to talk about.
Right.
So you spend 4 years, with this company in New York that's acquired Basic, and then you decide time to be an entrepreneur again. How long?
Tired to take a rest. Take a rest. Been running really hard ever since I went to university. Had a young family and didn't know what I was going to do other than just take a break. So I played dad, taking young kids to school, all that kind of stuff. And but I am an avowed kind of tech addict, and heard about through a friend, a colleague from Silicon Valley, phoned about a new company he was with, and they were doing a brand new technology, and it was they were called pen computers. It was a tablet that used a pen.
Pre-Palm Pilot, right?
Yeah. Around the same time,
Around the same time.
actually. It was
Okay.
called Go Corporation.
Okay.
They developed an operating system. They were making hardware. And there was a lot of venture money starting to pile into it because this was going to be the future. You would just have a tablet. You'd use a pen. You'd write on it. It would recognize your handwriting and convert it. And it would do all kinds of interesting stuff.
Amazing.
And it would have a modem and you could communicate with the rest of the world, all this kind of stuff. And so I phoned Keith up. I started thinking about it. And it was this founder's addiction to, trying something new, a new category. And I called Keith up, but he said, well, you got to have a look at this. And so we ended up starting a company called Pen Magic. As a result of that, called in a few of the old band members, as it often goes, and had a top tech team and tried to do it again.
And we're going to talk about Pen Magic and its transition to Pivotal in a sec, but I do have to give some flowers on the CRM side. From my research, what I understand, and I made that quip at the top of the show here, that before Pivotal, really, CRM was more like contact databases. And you folks put the relationship in CRM. That makes you pretty influential in the history of software, even if it's unknown. Am I exaggerating here? Tell me.
I think we played an important role. Prior to that, there were basically contact management.
Yes.
And there was a category called sales automation where there were primitive tools to do sales automation. But the way that actually happened is back to the Pen Magic thing. I think it's worth mentioning because it's an important lesson is that whole industry after 3 years and hundreds of millions of dollars going to it, the technology just couldn't come together to be feasible and usable. And so basically we were facing an industry going out of business and had to decide, are we going to wrap it up? We had venture capital at that point with a very famous firm from Silicon Valley, Kleiner Perkins was an investor. And we could have kind of distributed the remaining bit of money that was, because Keith and I had originally funded it ourselves, or we could try to do something different and pivot. And that's partially where the name came from.
No way.
Although Pivotal, we viewed this whole customer, there was a new category of business thinking called customer relationship management, which actually had been talked about in Fortune magazine, other things. And we thought, we could do software. We did a complete 180 that we could, because we knew enterprise software because we had been in the ACPAC business. And we knew that the front end of software, the customer-facing part, had not really been fully addressed, and that's kind of how the idea came about. And at that time, and I'm a big believer in sometimes that you have to watch when there are new technologies starting. At that time, Microsoft Windows was available, but Microsoft was going into the server business, and they were going heavily into the multi-user business called NT at the time. And so we recognized that there was a new technology platform that could enable this. And often new product categories are created when there are leaps in technology platforms that you can capitalize on. And that's kind of how that happened. It's also a really good message, I think. I'm a big believer that if you're going to be a risk taker and you're going to really try to do something different, you have to be prepared to fail. And you will fail. And there will be mini failures and there'll be big failures, right? And you have to accept those and move on and be willing to make the decision to move on. And we did that. And we took the same team. We had a really top-notch team. And it's sort of like there are movie producers that can do a comedy or they can do a drama. And we had a great team and we just did a 180 and we went in and we helped create this whole idea of software that integrated the whole function of sales, marketing, customer service in one unified view of the customer.
Norm, I looked it up. That's hundreds of billions of dollars of enterprise value across all of the companies building now, maybe even $1 trillion. And you're one of the, I'm going to say, godparents of that industry. It's quite remarkable. And I think people listening, people here in Vancouver don't know that Vancouver played a big role in, and we'll talk about that a little bit in a minute. I read somewhere that you have some regrets around growing too quickly in that business. This seems counter to the kind of grow at all cost, venture, throw it at the thing and see hockey stick, up and to the right. Tell me about that. I'm curious to dig in there a little bit.
Well, just to put it in historical context, this was in the late 90s.
Okay.
We started the CRM, we switched to CRM in, I think it was 94. And the internet was really starting to boom. This was the internet, and it just grew and grew and grew into what has infamously become known as the internet bubble, of course, which crashed in sort of 2001,
yeah,
2001-ish.
Yep.
And we like, and there's actually many parallels to what's going on today in AI. And I think we were caught the fervor of that.
Drank a little too much of your own Kool-Aid, so to speak.
Well, there was industry Kool-Aid,
sure,
right, and there was lots of venture money, and so the grow fast, grow revenue. Become the leader was foremost, and in hindsight, maybe we grew too quickly, and because what happened actually is that then 9/11 happened, and 9/11 really put all enterprise software and in fact internet, everything kind of went on hold for quite a while there because of the uncertainty that it caused, and that was a very by that time, I actually had resigned I had recruited a new CEO and I was chair of the board. But it was a hard driving, and it was hard on everyone. We went from in 94 to maybe, I think we went public in 98. And in that time, we went from having an idea and maybe a team of a dozen people to almost 800 people around the world in about 6 years flat, and 20 offices around the world. I was on the airplane all the time. And it was a very hard driving kind of time.
I'm going to fast forward a little bit to 2001,
right.
9/11. I'll come back to something before that in a minute, but you have talked about this being the most difficult leadership chapter of your life and how it was one of the hardest things you've ever done through business. Tell us about what happened, because for a lot of us know about what happened politically, but not a lot of us, including myself, know a ton about what happened in the business world and the software world. And what did you learn from that, especially in how to scale and how to build?
Well, I think you have to be able and willing to cut back. Now, as a public, we were a public company by this time, had been for a few years. And when you're a public company, every quarter, your last quarter is what are you doing for me this quarter is kind of the public markets. And so you sometimes are just forced to cut back, and we had to do large rifts, with staff, and it was a very, very hard because up until that time it had been up and away,
grow.
And then all buyers basically stopped buying because of the uncertainty caused by 9/11, and so the need to make the hard decisions. It was a very, very tough time because you're having to cut people that have been with you, and you just have to cut back and right size the business. And I've been through that a couple of times and later as a board member, and it's tough, but it's necessary.
What was it like emotionally? The world is in an uncertain place, and you're thinking about bottom line and staff cuts, and
Yeah.
We like to think about on this podcast a little bit about emotional inflection points, and this is clearly one in your journey.
Yeah.
What was your team feeling? How were you handling the pressure? Take me a little bit into like the non-boardroom side of this.
Well, I guess I was kind of on the other side of the table again, and by this time I was the chair of the board.
Right.
But obviously it was important at a board level too. But the relatively new CEO was having to handle most of it. It's hard to seeing people that have been with you for, maybe 5-6 years, being called into the office and, given their package and by the dozens, by the hundreds around the world. And so it was a tough time. It's emotional. It was an emotional time, obviously, for a lot of people. It's life. It happens. And in business, it just happens.
What did this teach you about leadership? Obviously doing it or, being a chair of the board. Are there any lessons you learned apart from this is the cycle of business? Or, is there anything you'd take away and really has left its mark on you?
Not a mark so much, but a learning. I think that one, maybe watching trends and making decisions more quickly to moderate a business, let's say, to cut back, to freeze hiring, to freeze spending, that kind of thing. I think entrepreneurs, especially when you get wound up in the fear of missing out because everybody else is doing it, I think it is, you tend to procrastinate because you're on a mission and you don't want to admit that maybe things are going sideways a bit in the market and you've got to modify the mission. And I think that's what I learned is basically be aware and watch more closely and be a little more conservative if the signals are going, if the flags are going
Trust
yellow.
the signals.
Trust the signals and make the difficult decisions without procrastinating.
Was COVID the closest equivalent in the last few years? Was it the '08 crash? Has there been other inflections like that? Or, are there more to come? Obviously, there will be more to come, but do you see any on the horizon, or are these shock events?
After the so-called internet bubble burst, I think the next big one was kind of the '08, '09 financial crisis. And obviously that was a huge shock also. COVID was probably the next one. And I guess one can argue that, today, what's going on in the Middle East, what's going on, with the change in America's attitude to business and around the world is the current version of the shock. But I think the important message is things never go straight up in a nice line.
That's right.
There will always be bumps in the road, and you need to be prepared for them. You need to accept them, and you need to make the corrective action, and you need to move on.
I'm going to take you back a year or two before that, because I'd be remiss to ask. You had dinner with Bill Gates, right?
I did. No, I had dinner with Bill Gates and other business people. Let's be clear on that.
At his house.
At his house.
Tell us, how did that even happen? How does a small kid from Oliver end up in one of the world's most historically amazing entrepreneurs in history's dinner table? And what did you learn from being in that room?
It was somewhat intimidating because I won't name the other people that were kind of at that dinner, but what Microsoft used to hold insider, they would invite the CEOs of some of their biggest customers, and like the CEO of Shell Worldwide, I remember, was there, and then other people like Warren Buffett was there, and Martha Stewart, and there was kind of this combination of people, and they would do this kind of insider event. It was really,
was it like an elevator pitch of what you're building for all these amazing people?
Yeah, they would hold this insider kind of conference, and it was they would talk really about their vision of the future. So it was kind of a soft marketing, and they would invite some of their technology partners, and we were doing a lot of business with Microsoft as a software partner, and that's what that was the reason I was invited to it, and the Gates would hold they had at the time a home on the lake, and they had a large kind of dining room, and they would basically hold a reception as part of this insider 2-day conference.
Obviously this was shortly before or shortly after Pivotal and Microsoft Bill Gates kind of promoted Pivotal's work, right?
They had been promoting it,
okay,
at that time.
And
yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about that, because to have such an influential and kind of global leader or stakeholder promote something like that for a Canadian and a Vancouver business. Tell me what that meant to you. Tell me how much work it took you to get there. How did that, dig into that a little?
Well, it was I referred previously to basing our strategy was based on this new technology platform that Microsoft had, and we were a showcase for what that platform could do. So it was kind of a mutually beneficial relationship. And then they being a very large company, they invested a lot in marketing our product, because our product showed what they could do. What their product could do.
Absolutely.
And in combination, it was kind of do a lot of joint selling. And it's a very effective technique for a smaller company to partner with a larger company, as long as you can control it, because often you can't. You can be overwhelmed, and Microsoft's not the easiest company to do business with, never has been. But it was very effective for us, and it gave us a huge amount of credibility. When they would launch new versions of Windows and NT server. Sometimes our software, and Bill, in those days, Bill always did the demos at these huge introduction events. And when your software, even if it gets 2 minutes of showing, oh, look at this great thing that this software demonstrates in our platform, it's worth its weight in gold for customer credibility.
We could spend all day talking about the business side, but I want to make sure we talk about this later phase in your life, especially around investing and philanthropy. In some ways, a natural evolution of your leadership. In other ways, a new and distinct, exciting thing for you to work on and dig into and learn to. When did this transition start? How did you go from operator to investor and then to philanthropist?
It was kind of a natural. By the time the internet bubble had calmed down, I was the chair of the board of Pivotal. We did the transaction to merge the company with another business, and by that time, and I was asked to be on one or two boards at that time, and by that time I was around 50, 51 years old, and I just felt I didn't want to be an operator anymore. I'd been running pretty hard for quite a while at that time. And it was just time to do a transition. But again, loving the industry, and I created a family office that we started investing in, doing a lot of early stage investing and investing in other things. And I was prepared for it. I had lots of hobbies. I was interested in philanthropy, and it was just time to move to a different phase of my life.
But that's a very different pace of life, too. Was there an adjustment period? Was there frustration? Was it awkward? Did you drive your wife crazy? Like, how was that? I think there's a lot of people in Vancouver, especially baby boomers, who are kind of in the midst of this transition. How did you handle it?
Well, I as I said, I had lots of hobbies. I had lots of interests. I've always been a car buff, old cars, since growing up in the 60s. So I was interested in cars. I've always been, done a lot of sports. I was interested in doing more skiing. I was interested in more travel. My wife by that time had retired. Family was more or less kind of out of the house. And so I had lots of interests, and there was no shortage of things to do. I think if you do not have a lot of outside interests, and you're not interested in, and you don't have a passion for, a curiosity for learning new things, I think it can be a real letdown, because your office, your business can be your community, and you're not as important anymore.
Yep.
Nobody calls you anymore, but after 6 months, they've kind of forgotten your name, and the lawyers don't call you to take you to the hockey game, and the investment bankers aren't flying you to Aspen because they want more investment banking business. So you do need to be prepared to, you're not as important anymore.
When we sold our last business, I remember that almost exactly what you said. After about 6 months, nobody called me anymore. Right. None of the staff said happy birthday or Merry Christmas or any of that stuff. It was a transition that I don't know, that part I was definitely not ready for. How did you
let me interrupt and say,
please.
There's an important message about relationships there. And as I've gotten older through my career, I kind of understand what relationships to value and which are relationships of convenience. And the reality is many business relationships, they're relationships of convenience. They're not genuine relationships. And the investment banker or the lawyer or the accountant, they need to move on with new relationships.
100%.
Because that's where the revenue is going to come from,
100%.
unless you're not. So not that those are all relationships, but I think it's important to be able to read people and what are genuine relationships. And I still have many relationships from the tech industry and the software business that are genuine friendships that go back many decades, because you developed a personal relationship, and the relationship might have started as a business relationship, but it became genuine friendship, lifelong friendships kind of thing.
So I think I learned after we sold our last business that I'm a pretty bad angel investor. I've had some pretty bad angel investments. My wife's pretty annoyed about it, I'll be honest. You, however, have picked some real winners over the years. What are some of your foundational principles about angel investing, and what did you pull from your years as an operator that bad ones like me have missed?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in this whole idea of don't even go into try to do something new unless you're sort of creating. You have a good chance to create a new category. So I'm a big fan of a book called Play Bigger,
You've
which is
sent me
kind of
that
one of the.
book.
I send it to many people I invest in. Say read this, and because there's so many ideas out there, they might look good, but they're kind of Me Too ideas, and
Mm-hmm.
there's no real compelling must have in the
Mm-hmm.
marketplace for whatever this new idea is.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something I look at first is this idea or product or services, can it be a must have? Because there's some pain out there that
Mm-hmm.
it's addressing and people, not a nice to have, a
Mm-hmm.
must have.
Mm-hmm.
The other key thing is the team, the founders. And that's probably a whole discussion in itself.
Of course.
But obviously the people, and are they savvy enough
Mm-hmm.
to execute on
Mm-hmm.
it? And there's a whole kind of, I think one gets better at it the more you do. And the other thing, recognizing in angel investing, is you're probably only going to be successful on 1 or 2 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reality.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to be, that's why you need such a big return on the ones that do become successful, because
To make up
it's
for all
going
the
to
ones
it's going to
you've
be
lost.
averaged down by the ones that you have complete write-off. And so the team, and I am also a big believer in building the foundation of a company, of entrepreneurs that understand that they need to build a foundation of the company to be a category leader
Mm-hmm.
and to ultimately win. And that gets to a really good shareholder base, great angel investors. I
Mm-hmm.
like to co-invest with other people
Mm-hmm.
that can bring value in
Mm-hmm.
addition to just writing a check. I like the idea of a founder that recognizes they should fairly early on form a board,
Mm-hmm.
and a really good board.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a number of factors that I look at. Those are some of the key ones to see, and then just really monitoring the execution
Mm-hmm.
closely and being prepared to walk away if it doesn't work.
I want to, before we move on to kind of the philanthropy side of this transition in your life, you talked about the team and the leaders. Are there any specific personality traits, features, things you look for in those leaders, in those believers who are building stuff?
Yeah, there are. And some of them are, I've referred to as kind of what my upbringing kind of did on the farm.
Mm-hmm.
Got to be extremely hard worker. Starting a business and growing a business is like really hard. It's really difficult. Someone has to be curious. They have to not fear failure. They have to be able to make decisions quickly. They need to have the ability to move fast. I like people who are competitive. Often an indication is like, what have they done in their personal life? Like, have they been a competitive athlete?
Mm-hmm.
I particularly like people who have been on sports teams, because you learn how to rely on other people.
Mm-hmm.
You learn how to go the extra 1% when you're on the 1 yard line, which can mean you're going to win or lose. The last batter up in the 9th inning of a baseball game, somebody who's not giving up at that point, you can still win. And being prepared to lose, because every sports team loses. The best, in fact, in many sports, having a winning average of just over 500 is actually
amazing.
Considered. You'll be the top of the league. So I like people who are competitive, and I like people who embrace the unknown, are not afraid of the unknown. I think 90% of people are basically, they're more comfortable in the past and in the current, and they're afraid of the unknown. And you shouldn't start a new business entering a new market, especially in the tech business, if you have a fear of the unknown.
Let's talk a little bit about philanthropy. You've been very generous with your time and your money over the last few decades. How has your definition of success in philanthropy changed? How have you had to change your mindset in what succeeding as a philanthropist is relative to being a business leader or being a dad?
Yeah, I think the main thing that I've learned in philanthropy is look at organizations that are willing to be accountable for results. So much of philanthropy is write a donation check, goes into a black hole and there's no accountability.
Mhm.
And so I like organizations that have a mission to help. I particularly like, and our family likes, organizations that are helping underprivileged kids and young adults, that kind of thing. I like organizations that measure how well they're doing. Are they really helping? Well, what are the metrics that they use? And that's kind of applying a few basic business-like principles without being too kind of harsh on it, as to being accountable for results. And people that really want to scale, if they've got a good idea, I think of them as social entrepreneurs. A good idea on how to help an underprivileged community of any kind, how they can scale that. It's like creating a new category of a product. If you create a new way of helping a community, can you then scale that to help thousands and thousands of people, in the future? So those are kind of the qualities that we as a family and our look for.
Norm, we could sit and chat all day, and we probably would, but for the cameras and our producers telling us we've got to finish. This podcast, our Cut podcast, is about amazing guests and who've built this city, and it wouldn't be the same without you. But before you go, we have a little tradition here on Giants, rapid fire questions. So I'm going to ask you a question in as quickly and efficiently as possible. Please share the response that comes to mind. The first question is, what is a company that you admire today?
SpaceX.
Why?
Going into the unknown, trying to do something that everyone said was impossible and doing it in a new way. Reusable rockets, internet from space, all those things.
It's beyond crazy.
Yeah. Given that 25 years ago, people said it was crazy and couldn't be done, and look at what it is today.
What is an investment that you passed on that you regret the most?
I don't know if I could think of one that I passed on, but one that I made a mistake on. I was very fortunate to be invited into the limited partnership that Kleiner Perkins had that made the first investment at Google.
Oh, wow.
As a private company. And Google, I was very small. But that was because we had done right by them.
Of course.
Anyway, when Google went public, of course, they distributed some of the stock. And I held the stock for a little while, and then I took the profit. Now, taking the profit's not bad. Now, in hindsight, I don't want to even compute. If I had taken those shares and put them in the drawer and pulled them out today, I don't want to even compute how much I left behind. Should have left them in the drawer.
What's the best investment you almost passed on?
Well, one, it's not an investment. We had an opportunity to sell the company at one point. The board of directors convinced me that the price wasn't good enough. I should have been more assertive. And I guess it's one that I did pass on. And that was, in hindsight, one of my big investment mistakes.
One trait in a founder that makes you trust them almost instantly.
Straight talker and passionately committed to whatever they're doing.
What about a trait in a founder that's a big red flag for you?
When the story changes, sometimes in subtle ways, as you're kind of getting to know them, or they're making a pitch or whatever, the story kind of morphs. And it can be because they don't really know what the story should be. And sometimes the story morphs because they're kind of not admitting problems.
One book every entrepreneur or builder should read.
I made reference to it, Play Bigger.
Your favorite podcast, and you're not allowed to say this one.
All In podcast.
I knew you were going to say that. You were the one who got me on that one. Yep. What is one luxury you refuse to give up?
Flying first class and staying in first class hotels. I stayed in too many flea bag motels and being on too many buses. I've earned the right to go first class.
Nobody's arguing with that one, sir. Favorite place in Vancouver to think? Maybe the golf course. It's my guess.
No, actually, Whistler, by myself, surrounded by the trees with the snow coming down and the fireplace on.
Yes, sir. What is one word your family would use to describe you?
Devoted.
Most underrated KPI.
Underrated?
Underrated.
Profit.
Overrated.
Revenue. Revenue. Valuation based on revenue multiple.
Best advice you've ever received?
Way back early in my career, I was really influenced when I was articling to be a chartered accountant by an older gentleman named Trevor Williams. And he would sit with me for hours, and he taught me how to view businesses with common sense and not to get lost in the trees and in the numbers. He used to say, Norman, just look at the financial statement, not the numbers per se, but what story does it tell you about the business? And stand back and use common sense to look at things. That's always stuck with me.
Folks, there you have it, the legendary Norm Francis. Thank you for being here today. We really appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Nice being with you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nejeed.
That was awesome. Thanks for being here and making us a part of your day. If you enjoyed the episode, share it with a fellow builder. Please keep the conversation going, whether it's at your dinner table or on the SkyTrain. Continue to create, transform, and build a better Vancouver. Ciao.